Hello, everyone. Welcome to Blue Star Rising, Templar Awakening. Michael Dunn here with my good friend, Reverend Maia Nartoomid. Good morning, Maia.
Good morning, Michael, and good morning, the world.
Yeah, here we go. This is a multi-part dive into one of the um, more profound journeys that it's possible to make, from my point of view anyway, mythologically, mystically, metaphysically, and it's the ancient past coming right here into today's headlines, as they like to say, about what we see happening around us in our world. And so, this is about Osiris and the crystal skulls and the arising of Osiris and the role of Isis in that arising, which in truth, that arising is really about the awakening within us. The true dynamic of that arising is the heart activation within us, within you. So we have 3 videos that Maia has prepared. And for those of you who have been watching our shows, you know that there's wonderful artistry that accompanies the depth of meaning and information that Maia weaves into these video creations. So that's a special treat for us all today. So Maia, do you want to explain to us about the first video that we're going to see, which is essentially an overview of Osiris and the crystal skulls?
Yes, that's exactly right. It's taken from some of the material that I've written previously on it, and kind of massaged it together for this show. And then, of course, I put it into a video format. I think my microphone is a little off center. There we are. So, it's pretty self-explanatory. But, the figure of Osiris is a twofold from the Thothic perspective. One is a real soul, and the other, a very advanced soul, obviously, on the Thothic level. And the other is a universal dynamic. And this dynamic is also an ascension dynamic. So I guess you could say it's threefold in a way. So let's just watch the first one and then we'll talk about it a little bit.
Okay. And I do want to mention I was particularly engaged by the Christic element, the integration between the soul of Yeshua, Jesus, and the universal dynamic that took place in the actual historical life of Jesus and on the universal level for the planet and for all of us. So with that, please enjoy, and we'll be back with you immediately afterwards.
The true Osiris, on a universal level, is the spark of divinity that has been perceived as separate or even lost from us. It never went anywhere. It is still here. We have buried our desire to live this deep in the underworld, the supraconscious, like a glimmering starfish at the bottom of the sea. Osiris is arising from the deep. It is now that we are awakening and seeing what there was all along. The awakening to awareness is the arising. Yet there are many components to this, from the perspective of our reality play, and the ascension trigger is to be found within a moment in the vault of Osiris in the earth, where Gaia gathers her skirts and presents herself to the universe of awakened being. The soul of the actual entity called Osiris was the escort soul to the soul of Yeshua or Jesus, in that it entered the same incarnation with him to guide him through the flesh, and then exited when at the baptism Yeshua received the Christic being. The Osiris soul returned into the Yeshua body at the time of his transition on the cross to unite for the purpose of undergoing that experience on many dimensions. So in essence, when Thoth speaks of Osiris and his arising, he is opening the scroll on the ultimate resurrection of the Christic being through the vehicle of the world soul we all share within our DNA and humanity. Isis also plays an essential role in this dynamic. It is she who pulls the creational space into the heart of Osiris. Osiris and Isis work in tandem with the 72 dweller crystal skulls. All of 2 of these are in a slightly removed dimension, whether either in caverns or vaults around the world or inside the interior realm of the planet, inner Earth, with a grouping of them, the Metatrons, as Thoth calls them, in other world dimensions. These dweller skulls are crystalline matrices in an exact duplication of once living being skulls. They contain the light encodings of the intelligence of the true beings, as well as a form of lineage memory that streams into our living DNA to lend the memory which was lost, or rather would be asleep otherwise. The section of memory involved has to do with our true star lineage, or divine blueprint, that Thoth refers to with the Hebraic name of Adam Kadmon. Even the Adam Kadmon genetic blueprint is only for this current Earth domain, but we must keep the codes in order to transition from a World System 1, old current planet, to a World System 2, new Earth star. Every human being on the Earth is directly related to one or more of the dweller beings who have incarnated on this Earth several times, not just the lifetime their skull was crystallized. Their crystal skulls contain the light codes not only back from that point in their incarnational lineage, but forward as well. In the past, most of these skulls have moved around from one thresholding chamber to another. Some were transported via light Merkaba, while others through more conventional means. Most are now in a subdimensional betwixt and between state, but they can come into full presence with us at times. All the dweller crystal skulls form a matrix Thoth is calling the Osirim. There are 12 of the dwellers which Thoth classifies as the lotus. They holographically project into an enclave within Mount Kailash, where they hold the entire 72 dweller matrix stable and active as a whole. The dweller skulls are essential companions to the sacred On arc and the new Earth arcs. The Osirim matrix is interactive with the Pyramidus radius matrix, now developing on the planet, which is the alpha omega of all our planetary grids, including them all now in its formation. Thoth is now referring to the dweller crystal skulls as light shells. So let's go beyond seeing them as crystals that look like human skulls and view them as light shells of commonality to the human spectrum of life within the holographic universe. In this capacity, they are quantum mechanic renderers, rendering into focal dimension whole star fields contained within the shape, dimension, and scope of the human brain and its larger holographic machine. In the message I received from Paloma, the Mu priestess whose crystal skull is within Mount Waialeale on Kauai, she declared, "The dwellers are as you, in the moment when your flesh is stripped to reveal the crystal light beneath. We come to your shore in this age so that you may arise to greet us, and in this act become who you truly are. Thoth is stressing to me that the capstone dynamic of this whole dweller activation is focused upon the quickening of the vault of Osiris within the Great Pyramid, which Thoth calls the Temple of the Risen One. This is a complex quantum movement which will occur as the actual final trigger of Light Principle 40, the moment of planetary ascension. It is when the soul of Osiris will dance in concert with the violet flame in the Osirian vault. This will create the quantum passage activation Thoth is calling the Osiris Firestar Kachina dance. Who is raising Osiris? Is it the soul of Osiris? All 72 dwellers? It is both, but really they are only acting as vessels for the 144,000 of us, humanity. We are the Osirian ascenders. Without the quickening awareness of the 144,000, none of this will take place. Let me make it clear at this point that I am not saying one has to subscribe to any belief system like dweller crystal skulls, true or not. It is a matter of universal I am awareness. Those of the human race who reach this quantum threshold will be joined by their star kindred and other species of Earth, the cetaceans, elephants, cats, dogs, etc., as well as the interdimensionals, such as the unicorns and dragons. Altogether, we will find that place of union once again.
All right, welcome back, everyone. The crystal skull phenomenon is something that has, found its way into what we might call New Age legend and myth, and of course, even a blockbuster movie, Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. But now, this is bringing it forward in a way that is deeply woven with the destiny of humanity and the earth, with the universal Christ consciousness, and how in the story of Yeshua, of Jesus Christ, the pivotal role as you've received it, Maia, of Osiris, the soul of Osiris in that redemptive dynamic. And so, I was particularly struck by that because for me, but also particularly when you said that the real arising, or when Thoth gave to you the fact that the real arising of Osiris, yes, there is the soul of Osiris. Yes, there is the role of Isis in that awakening. But the essential dynamic is here in our hearts, that it is our resurrection, you might say, as Paramahansa Yogananda put it in the title of his commentary on the Gospels. It's called The Second Coming of Christ, the Resurrection of the Christ within you, within us, right? So, so do you want to elaborate a little more on that dynamic and the nature of this phenomenon of the crystal skull?
Yes. Well, Osiris, the whole dynamic of Osiris, whether it's the soul or the cosmic dynamic, the ascension dynamic, it's all kind of interwoven. Obviously, the solar Osiris plays a role in it in some final staging of the dance of the peacock Kachina Firestar dancer. But it's boiled down to being a quantum dynamic. And the crystal skulls, the dweller crystal skulls, hold the keys and codes of uniting the stellar frequencies, the stellar DNA that's in our being, activating it in a way so that we can release the stigmas that we hold to, and all this, even all this racial stuff that we have on the planet that's been a sore, for so many years. It comes out of being separated from the true star tribal function that we serve on this planet. It's not something out there in the stars. The stars penetrate the earth. We are a part of that nature, and the earth is imbued with these star codes, and we are as a result. But you see, we've become lost from it. So some of us, choose to try to make ourselves feel right about it somehow, and that's where all the racial stuff comes in. We've got to choose sides, choose skin colors, choose religions, because we're searching, we're scrabbling in the dirt to try to find that one little sliver of starlight. And of course, it doesn't work that way. So the dweller skulls, which are crystallized versions of actual beings, Thoth is one of them, that hold those codes, and they've created this skull dynamic to be able to give us these codes in a crystallic, computer-like form. And as we interact with that, subliminally, of course, because who else knows about this dweller business but me? I don't know, maybe somebody else does. But the terminology that's being given here. But as we interact with that energy, it becomes an avenue for us to embed it more deeply in our subconscious and in our actual cells, to liberate ourselves from the old cycle of search that has been so unfruitful during these many, many years of trying to blame others or separate from others so we can be the ones. It's like the all-inclusiveness has been lost. The understanding of the purpose of all these different races, of the purpose of the directions that we have traveled in all these different religions. As far as the religions are concerned, now is the kind of the standard to do a make wrong on that. Oh, religion, I don't do religion. Well, yes, religion has really had some bad stuff, happen in all religions. Most likely it's been there for a very, very long time. But we have to understand the path that's taken and why we've created religions. It's been a search for that God self. And the same thing with, distorting the true pure gem body consciousness by trying to create the super race. It's like all of these things have become distortions, horrible distortions of the true path. But it doesn't serve any purpose to beat ourselves over the head with it. But the purpose is to change that in one way or another. Of course, that's a whole nother soapbox. I'm going to get off of that now. But the hosting skulls help us delineate the true, not the hosting skulls, I'm sorry, the dweller skulls help us delineate that consciousness. And you don't have to believe in them. You don't have to be listening to this transmission, although we feel that's good, or we wouldn't be doing it. It's part of the program of light, and you can call it other things. You can work with it in different ways. So let me just go back for a moment and talk about how it all began for me, very briefly. It started when I had a dream experience that was far more than a dream. It was around the year 1980, 79 or 80. And I was in Salt Lake City at the time. And it was early morning hours, and I was sound asleep And yet I was suddenly brought into this place that was not a dream. I was astral traveling through time because I was seeing this city of white gleaming stone. And it was obviously some ancient city. And I heard a ratting sound like a shaman tools, you know, in the rhythm, very, very strong. And I'm just floating over this city, very close to the ground. I mean, I just barely made it over a wall, you know, and I was seeing it, and there it was, and then it was gone. But when it was gone, I noticed that I came out of it, but my eyes were still closed, and I could see every detail in my bedroom in the early dawn light with my eyes closed. I could see it all, just as if, you know, I didn't need a body. So I guess I was still sort of in an astral state. So that day, I went to the library for something else. In those days, you had to go to a library if you want to read a book or buy one at a bookstore, you know. So I was in the library just looking around, and I heard thump behind me. And I know many people have had this experience. I turned around, and there was a book that had just jumped out of the shelf. There was nobody else around, and fallen at my feet. And I picked it up, and it was a book on the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull, but it was the journey itself, how it began in the city of Louboutin, when the young woman, a child then, was the one that found it, because she was with her archaeological father, and she was the one that found the famous Mitchell Hedges skull. And the name of the city was Louboutin, and they said in the ancient days, they could tell because there were still paint chips left or whatever, it was solid white. It was a gleaming city of white. Well, what I had seen was a very Mayan-like city, only it was all in white in my dream that very night. So I was obviously very interested. I read the book, you know, but then that was that for a while, but probably another year or two passed, and that was when Thoth started telling me about the dweller crystal skulls, that certain illumined beings, and some of them not as illumined as others, some of them were more human, but they were still very evolved, had gone through a process where their skulls had either been turned to crystal or they had had a duplicate as they left the body. Their program of in the brain had been redirected into some kind of a crystalline focus, and it had been created into a crystal skull. Now, at the time, I really didn't understand how the crystal skulls had been made. I was told that the Mitchell Hedges one was actually the whole skeletal system, as well as the head, had been crystallized. Later, I was to learn that most of them were not done that way. It was this other way where it's like, you know, the energy of the brain is taken and put into a crystalline format. But however they got there, the purpose for these skulls is to maintain that star tribal energy, consciousness, memory, if you will, and to guide us into the stars. We, the ones that will be most attuned to this and help us open this will be the indigenous tribes, because they're moving out of their old format now. Nothing was wrong with that old format, but cycles change, and they're taking that energy and looking at it from the perspective of where they're going with that, where the planet is going with that. You know, the prophecies of the Hopis, Mayans, others have brought us to a point, and now that they're going to be like taking a giant leap into this new spectrum, this new energy. And it's not going to just be the indigenous ones, but they are very much a part of that sequencing. Now, you know, there's a lot of talk about the 13 crystal skulls, the grandmothers, you know, guardian the 13 crystal skulls and all of this. Thoth talks about, you know, the Lotus 12, and there is a 13th, and that's what he calls the, but it's not an actual skull. It's the 13th living crystal skull. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But it's not the same. The skulls that have been popularized up to this point are very important, very valid, but they're a subsystem of the one that Thoth is speaking about. And there are other subsystems as well. Doesn't make them, you know, unimportant. They're all very important, but they're subsystems of this greater picture, according to Thoth, according to what I receive, which is all I can go by, of course. Okay, so before I get into the dwellers, not the dwellers, the hosts, the hosting skulls, Michael, would you like to say anything?
Well, the thing that comes forward for me before we move on into the hosting skulls is if you could share a little bit on the role of Osiris and Yeshua and the reality of the Christ, the cosmic Christ, the Christ as embodied in Yeshua, and particularly, I found it a very powerful part of the video that that we just saw, the description of the redemptive dynamic that took place, with the crucifixion and the resurrection, and the role of the Osiris soul and the Yeshua, Jesus soul in that. I know it's a little bit of a divergence from what we're talking about, but I think it's obviously such a powerful element for so many people that
Yes.
as we're moving over into talking about the hosting skulls, can you just take a minute or two to explore that?
Right. Well, there's a lot to that. And of course, I'm not going to go off on all of that now. We probably should do a show on it, because Thoth speaks about the sun spirits and that Yeshua's soul, the pure, both the Osiris soul and the soul that Thoth calls the pure soul of Yeshua, that had never been incarnated before that experience as Yeshua, are both sun spirit souls, and so is Thoth. And again, I'm not going to go off on the topic of that because that's rather detailed. But in order for the pure soul to have its mission on this planet and to do what it needed to do, because we see a very short period of time when Jesus lived, right? He was born, got the star, Bethlehem, the teaching, the 33 years that the missing years, that were in India and other places. Then he comes back and he does his biblical years that are talked about. And then, the crucifixion, and then he rises again from the dead. And then there's the Ascension. There's the whole storyline. And all of those things are accurate according to Thoth. They may have slightly different interpretations on a more dimensional scale, but, they did occur. But but all of that happened was in a short span of 33 years. And look how it's affected the planet. Now, I know a lot of things have happened in Judeo-religious context that have been very nasty, that have not worked out well, because humanity didn't follow their true heart spectrum in what they did. Politics entered the scene. Let's just call it for what it was. But despite that, the Judeo-Christian energy, lineage of consciousness pervades. It's there. You have to dig for it, but it's still there. It's still present in those religions. And because it was only 33 years of time on the planet, Thoth tells me that Yeshua, the soul, the pure soul of Yeshua, who was there for the greater part of all that time by itself, well, not by itself. It had to invest itself with the archangelic Christic being and the sun spirit energy from the whole grid. And that's when the Osiris soul left and allowed all that to come in. And then he came back to help the pure soul across in the whole process of the crucifixion. Because there was so much that the pure soul had to do. And it had to be a pure soul. It couldn't have lived on this planet before or after, for many reasons. So how was it going to deal with this? It takes a certain amount of living here, grounding in this reality to be able to do the kind of nitty-gritty stuff that Yeshua had to do. He wasn't floating on a cloud. He was, living in a very troubled period of time, and talk about slings and arrows, and then he had to die that horrific way. So there needed to be a soul that had been through that spectrum, at least touching on the highlight points of that spectrum, that had an anchoring in the earth that was profound, and that is the Osiris soul. If we were to do his history, which I haven't, I imagine it would be pretty impressive in regard to that. But he went through the path. And actually, I did do some of it because I wrote a manuscript called Christ in the Earth in the 1970s, way early 1970s. And I didn't know about the two souls then. I just thought it was one. And the lifetimes I was giving and certain things I was talking about were the Osiris soul. So it did go through a lot. So it had the gumption, shall we say, the power of living here to be able to help the pure soul, which was in a way a delicate creature, not delicate like me, like that, but delicate in the sense of having an experience in this kind of realm. So they needed to work together. But once the baptism started, you see, the Osiris soul could leave because that was when that pulled in the greater consciousness of the Christic archangel into the being with the whole dynamic of the sun spirit energy. So then Yeshua wasn't alone in that. He had the power invested into him from the Christic one. So when it came time to go through the ordeal of the crucifixion, Osiris came back in. He needed to help him ground so he could move through that process. So I don't know if that entirely answers your question, but that's the little story I was giving here.
Yes, it certainly clarifies it powerfully.
I do want to mention,
go ahead.
just last thing, Rudolf Steiner, now I'm not a big student of his, but I admire his work, and I do know that he said that there were two Jesuses, but they had two separate bodies. Now, how do we coordinate that with what I received? I feel that Osiris was living in another body until Yeshua reached a certain stage, and he needed that soul to come with him, and so he left that body and went into his body. That's the picture I feel probably occurred. I haven't got an absolute from both on that, but I think that's probably brings the two stories together.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And I'm wary of some of these distortions out there. And how do we know they're distortions, right? We're just going with our intuition, sometimes out of our biases from our own particular religious tradition or upbringing. For myself, there are people who talk about, there were three Jesuses, and there was one up in France, and there was one in Egypt, and then there was one went to, and I think, okay, and this is going out on the alternative web and various people. What is the ultimate effect of this getting distributed in the public consciousness? Always look at the ultimate effect. Well, the ultimate effect of some of those distortions is to water down and diffuse and weaken in the public consciousness the impact and reality of Jesus Christ. Okay, so I have a wariness around that, particularly because of all my experience with disinformation and defamation as a longtime tactic of the dark faction.
I totally understand that.
Yeah.
Rudolf Steiner, though, is the real deal.
Well, yeah, Steiner, that's another matter.
Yeah. So I take that seriously, and I look at it, and that's what I feel guided to say, that that was the transition that was made, and he needed to help him anchor him as a child by being on the planet at the same time. It's kind of like you get on your parachute and you got your buddies with you, and they all put on their parachutes, and you jump out of the airplane. And when you do, you have to have a certain formation, or you go
right. Yeah, I like that metaphor. Yeah, I was like, yeah, let's hook up. Are you getting with me? Okay, smile. Off you go. Yeah. So, you talked about the Judeo-Christian tradition and dynamic, and obviously that's there's a huge truth to that, and yet it's also misleading when if you look at the community of the Essenes from which Jesus came, from which his mother Mary came, and this is historically documented. The Essene community, which is thought by historians to have been in Judea like from 150 BC, and then it mysteriously sort of fades out around 50 AD. Well, that's because essentially it became Christianity, became the early pure apostolic Magdalene form of Christianity, and that the Essenes are called a Jewish sect, but in reality, they were so far outside of mainstream Judaism in the Holy Land at that time that certainly, they observed the High Holy Days, they went to the temple, but they practiced a very pure form of living. Men and women were more equal. They believed in reincarnation. They were preparing for the coming of the Messiah. They had these communities where it's, if we live purely enough and raise our vibrations high enough, we shall prepare the ground for the coming of the Messiah. And so it's actually much more in tune with Vedic practice and belief than it is with mainstream Judaism of the time. And when it comes to, traditionally we speak of Judeo-Christian. We go, okay, Old Testament, 10 Commandments, and of course Jesus references it many times. There's the law and the prophets have told you this, I tell you this. He speaks with authority. There's the law and the prophets, yes, and now, forgive your brother 70 times 7. Not an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but love those that do wrong to you. And the 10 Commandments also, this is the missing piece, is that, the pharaonic Egypt, metaphysics and knowledge and spirituality, there are versions of the 10 Commandments which predate Moses on Egyptian tablets, just like you see Charlton Heston holding up in the movies. So, there's a very strong Egyptian metaphysical stream within what we refer to as, Judeo-Christian. And this, scholars know this, archaeologists know this, rabbis know this. And yet, as one very famous rabbi just said privately to an archaeologist about this, well, every religion has their stories, and we don't want to disturb our stories with archaeological facts that don't tend to validate, strictly speaking, Exodus, Passover, etc. Now, obviously, these are, deeply rooted in Jewish tradition and record true events, but there's a bigger picture. So, when we talk about Osiris and Isis, when we talk about the Essenes, the Magdalene, to realize, the high spirituality stream that Christ emerged from, that the Vedas, which, in India, Vedic festivals are identical to many, Egyptian ones, that it's the same knowledge coming from the East, coming from India, and that, it is said by many that Mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, were of an Isis mystery school. And so it all actually is this common, beautiful spiritual heritage of humanity that we, that's part of us, part of our cultural and religious consciousness, but we don't quite touch on it. I mean, here's the great Augustine. Saint Augustine refers to the true religion that was before the Christ, and this is what he's referring to. So, I digress a little bit, but I just wanted to draw these threads together when we're talking about Yeshua, Jesus, the Christ consciousness, Osiris, Isis. It's not as if we're just, bringing in a bunch of, pagan Egyptian gods who are idol worshippers, and now you're trying to get us to believe that Osiris is and all this. No, there is, archaeologically, historically, metaphysically, theologically, there is a stream that, is integrated in various ways, that we need to just remember the bigger picture of spiritual evolution in humanity on this planet over these thousands of years. And particularly, and here we can segue back to the dweller skulls and the hosting skulls, as you're about to get into, which is, the Templar. We are Blue Star Rising, Templar Awakening. That the Templar stream, which, as we receive it, came from the union after the resurrection of the Magdalene and Ishoa and John Martinus on the Isle of Iona. It's a beautiful and powerful story. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. But in terms of the Templar mission to preserve and embody these high teachings in a very dark time, as you say, Maia, a very tumultuous, dark time, and that the crystal skulls, which is the main topic of our program today, is a powerful activational dynamic, and it's a powerful light code embedding that we can commune with in awakening our own Osiris spark, as you say, yes. Within our beings. And that, for example, as you share about the difference between the dweller skulls and a hosting skull that has received the light encoded energy and intelligence frequency of a particular being in order to help us tune in with it and awaken to our true work in the ascension process. So with that, thank you for your patience with my digression there. I hope it was helpful. Do you want to share about the dweller skulls and the hosting skulls?
Right. Well, it kind of, I'd been hearing about the dwellers from Thoth since the 1980s, and I have quite a bit of material on that. And how there are different groupings of guardians of the dwellers. One of them is in the inner earth, the Hokamai tribe. Whole nother story. We're not going to get into all of that. I mean, all of these things, because it's dealing with over 53 years of my work, there's just so much of it, I can possibly tell it all. So what I do, in a show, I just touch on the main finer points. So that's what I'm trying to do here. So, as most of you know, I lived in Kauai from 2004 to 2017. And actually, I lived in Maui for the first 6 months, but the rest of the time was on Kauai. And so in 2016, well, actually probably even started in 2015, I received that there was a dweller skull from a Lemurian priestess that had been in its thresholding chamber in Mount Waialeale, and at some point it had left there, and now it was going to be brought back. Now, Mount Waialeale on Kauai is a very, very sacred mountain to all Hawaiians on all the islands. But from the Thothic perspective, it is the font of Lemuria. That's what he calls it, because Kauai is the oldest island. And as they will tell you, there are many people, native traditional people that know that it's part of Lemuria. Well, the whole islands are, but you see the difference is that Kauai is actually got some rocks and soil right on the surface, or more or less on the surface, that were part of Lemuria, whereas, the other islands there's been so much lava activity that it's covered that. So there are little places, especially high places on Kauai, that are still part of the motherland for real, the real stuff, the real thing. And Mount Waialeale is the most prominent place. It's got the most of the actual Lemuria there. And so it's very sacred, and it's the Waialeale is the mother of tears, because it's, there's waterfalls are beautiful there. And it's got a beautiful blue hole at the bottom. It's just one of the most sacred places on the planet. And there's a temple atop Mount Wiley, the ruins of it. Not gigantic, but not tiny either. And it can only be seen by helicopter. And the helicopters can't even land where this thing is. And it's like, how did they do that? You know, it's still a puzzle. They said, well, I had to have these ropes and pulleys. No, I don't think so. How did they do that? You know, that's a whole nother mystery story. So that's the mountain that the Lemurian priestess had her thresholding chamber, probably long before it was the Hawaiian Islands, part of Mu, you know. And then at some point she left. Maybe she left and came back many times. I don't know. Well, I know it was at least twice because I'm getting to that. So I was told that she was going to be coming back again, her crystal skull. And then not long after that, I don't know, it was a few months, I saw on YouTube this thing, not YouTube, Facebook, and it about the crystal skull in Hawaii and Kauai. And I went, what? You know, and I clicked on it and it said that there was this legend that the Polynesians brought this sacred object that was wrapped, but like a head, to Kauai to bring it back to where it belonged. And there was rumor, or, you know, that it was a crystal skull. So that just blew me away. So I knew it had been back before and left again, maybe more than that, but I think it was just twice. It was there, left, and it was brought back by the Polynesians. And apparently it had left again and was being brought back again. Or maybe when the Polynesians brought it back, that was when it arrived. But I don't think so. I think it's the other way around. Sorry, I'm doing a brain fog here. So anyway, it went back and forth, you know, and it was coming back again. So this excited me, and I didn't know what else to make of it. I mean, I waited for further information. And then a few months after that, in 2016, I happened to be on a Zoom with Edie Cooper, our dear friend and part of our Johannine Templars here, and her partner, Bill Buehler, who is our colleague, dear one, who passed away 2 years ago. And out of the corner of my eye, I saw a crystal skull sitting on the table. Well, I've seen a lot of crystal skulls, you know, but this one there was something about it. And I said, what is that? And she said, oh, that's one of the skulls that her late husband, John, had, and she inherited it. Of course, he collected a lot of sacred objects. And it was most likely a contemporary skull, you know, it was crafted somewhere, but it's a beautiful one. And I will show it to you in a minute. And so when that was over, Thoth said to me, that is a good candidate for a hosting skull for the White Queen, the Lemurian priestess that's returned now. That skull. And I didn't know quite what to do with that. So I just wrote Edie and I said, well, Edie, Thoth is saying that would make a good skull for this project, this hosting thing that's going to happen. Maybe I could buy it from you, you know, maybe in installments or something, or maybe you don't want to sell it. It's too priceless to you and you want to keep it, and that's fine. I'm sure we can come up with another, you know, in fact, another skull for this project. But I thought I'd ask since Thoth asked me to ask. So I did, and she just said, you can have it. So in the process of getting it to me, Unity Grace brought it from Crestone to Kauai, but in the meantime, she took it with those total permission to all these various sacred places, from Hopi land to Maia land, to Machu Picchu. It went through all kinds of processes. Natives touched it, you know, indigenous touched it and recognized the power in it. Again, the power that had been invested in it by the true White Queen. And so now it's here with me here. Ooh, let me try to pick it up. It's awfully heavy. There we are. See, there she is.
Maia, yes. Could you hold it up again, please?
Yes.
I know it's heavy, but I just don't want the moment to sort of slip past here, yeah. Okay? Because what you're sharing with us is that crystal skull, the White Queen, has become the hosting skull.
The hosting skull
for
The act-
the light codes, energy, and consciousness of the Lemurian priestess, ancient soul, white queen, who has this, powerful role in the Ascension dynamic, and with the temple on Kauai, that for the purposes of your work in Crestone, which is the crown chakra of the Ascension grid for the planet, that you were guided to have that crystal skull we've just seen, the White Queen, be the hosting skull for this energy consciousness presence of the
of,
White Queen.
of the actual dweller crystal skull. Of course, the White Queen is given her codes. I mean, the priestess has given her codes to it, but this skull is connecting to the actual dweller skull.
Right,
So,
and that one is not the Mitchell
this is
one. I
this is
just
the
think
one.
our viewers are going to be asking these questions because there's a lot in the field. So I just
Right.
want the nature and purpose of what you've just shown us, the White Queen hosting skull, to be clear to people. Do you want to share a little bit on, okay, so what is the nature and purpose in your work, and it's there in your sacred space, of that hosting skull for the White Queen?
Yeah. First, I want to say that there more came through. Not all of the 72, but I have other hosting skulls, all contemporary, that serve that purpose for various ones. And then also, those opened the door for some of the persons I know, friends and light workers, to have one or more hosting skulls as well. So there's a group of us that have hosting skulls, not as many as I do right now, but they have some as well. And we don't do some kind of get together and do ceremonies, or it's not that kind of a thing. It holds a presence. And sometimes each one of us in our own way will work with the skulls, in communion or whatever, but it's not some big fancy ceremonial experience. It's a heart experience. It touches, you can feel the energy interacting, and that's basically the best I can describe it. So the hosting skulls are a further accent of this field of energy, allowing them to be in the presence of human beings in their homes, and allowing that energy interaction to take place, because each human being that is doing this is acting for all of humanity, because that's the plan. That's the way it works. So it's just another level, a sub-level, you would say, of allowing this energy to interact with the planet. Now, it's not important that everybody believe in crystal skulls or what I'm talking about, dwellers, or any of this. I think it's good to share it with people who are resonant with it, because that helps to, expand the field. But the importance of it is simply that it is present. It is a spiritual and energetic and physical dynamic. It's an interaction of the three. And it allows all of us to experience the encoding of the star tribes. And again, the star tribes aren't out there in the stars. They're stars, it's in the planet. These stars have embedded in the planet, these frequencies. And it helps us to maintain, hold, and deliver them back to us at the most crucial moments when we're going through these dynamics. All the dweller beings can't just suddenly appear to us, not at first. So their skulls are present in these enclaves all over the planet. And of course, we've got the Mitchell Hedges skull. Only the Mitchell Hedges and the Compassion skulls are coffee table versions that are here among us. The others are in these slightly removed dimensions in their thresholding chambers. And you can Google the Compassion crystal skull. Joseph Bennett, I believe is his name. He's a really wonderful guy, him and his wife. And as far as I know, they're still accepting visitors to be able to come and interact with Compassion. And I think the Mitchell Hedges, since she died, it's not on display anymore. So anyway, the fact that they're with us and sending these signals out into our field. And, using the tribe light station, that's that frequency that we're operating on right now to do this video, it further accelerates the energy fields and the patterns to reach all of humanity who are open to that reception. And when I say open to, I don't mean believing in something. I mean open in the heart, in the frequency of the heart. Michael, I don't hear you.
Right. So let me just share a little bit my own experience with this, because at a certain point, you said you had received that it would be a good thing for me to have a hosting crystal skull of my own that would sit on my altar for me to, be present to. And that, okay, so I went online, went on to Amazon and picked myself out a nice crystal skull I kind of liked, right? So then once I had it, you let me know, okay, I've received that. There will be a hosting moment when this crystal skull of yours, which is not just an ordinary contemporary, beautiful crystal skull, will receive sort of an indwelling presence of, the light codes and energy consciousness, etc., of a particular high being, in this case a Templar knight, who would at a certain moment actually become present in this hosting skull. And I remember I was up in Boulder, Colorado at the time, and you were down here in Crestone. And so I had this skull, and he said, well, I received that it will become a hosting skull tonight. Like, oh, okay. Like when, how will I know? And you said, well, just probably sometime while you're sleeping. And so I had it on my meditation altar in the place where I was staying. And so, it wasn't like, some great cosmic ceremony with a spectacular display of astral lights and a humming and a authority. I've had things like that sometimes, but I just woke up in the middle of the night with a sort of wah, 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 and thought, oh, maybe that was it. And for me, this crystal skull, which I will share with you here, this crystal skull is the hosting skull for the light codes of a Templar being who I can just sort of touch and tune in with. And, it sits on my altar next to my Johannine Templar consecrated sword and the Grail cup that our dear friend William Buehler used, as an ordained priest in the liberal Catholic Church when doing Holy Communion. And, for myself, I just want to share this to let people know, this isn't about, to receive the ascension dynamic of the crystal skulls. You have to ascribe to this belief system, believe in the crystal skulls, and then, along comes with this other sort. No, that's not it. My spiritual path and practice has been self-realization fellowship and the Kriya Yoga initiation and lineage of Paramahansa Yogananda. And I was raised Catholic. I have a picture of Christ on my altar, and I have a cross on my altar, and a large picture of Yogananda, and a few other sacred objects and pictures for meditation. And so this crystal skull is there as well, and it feels like a Templar stream link for me, because there's these distorted legends that get told about particularly by factions that are looking to drag down and taint the Templar name and stream and lineage, that they worshipped a skull, they worshipped and it was really Baphomet, and it's really a dark practice and lineage, and they started the evil, corrupt Babylonian banking system, which gave rise to the Illuminati. You don't want to trust those Templars. Well, Mary Magdalene, okay, in terms of her relics, that's one element of that stream, and this is another. Practiced by the inner circle of esoteric understanding within the Templars. So it's just, a very important, just this little cautionary note, whenever you hear some spiritual lineage or brotherhood, sisterhood being disparaged in this way. Oh yeah, well, the real story on them is, they worshipped a head, or they were satanic, or they give it. That is, there's going to be some infiltration of any authentic spiritual movement in order to drag it down. There will be defamation of any genuine spiritual movement in order to drag it down. And it's almost like a badge of honor that if you're important enough and true enough and high enough and light enough to carry genuine upliftment for humanity, you will be the target of defamation and tainting. And so you go online, I may have said this before, but it's worth repeating. You go online and just type into Google the real story of, or the truth about, you'll get a bunch of different search options that go, the real truth about the Jesuits, or about the Jews, or about the Masons, or about the Franciscans, or about, because, and that just represents the tainting and disinformation. And yes, there is genuine infiltration. The Vatican seriously infiltrated with the dark faction, pedophilia, enough to taint. And within all these organizations, there does still flow the high stream that Spirit brought in to help us all. So we just got to use our discernment. Just wanted to touch on that. But so that's the nature of our friend here, who I happened to share it with some friends in Boulder at the time. And, they weren't Templars. They were just, but when I brought it forward and I shared with them, there was palpable awe in the room because they sensed a presence as I did. Anyway, so I think probably time for our next video.
Yes.
You want to share with us about it?
Right. This is on what Thoth calls the 13th living crystal skull. Now, this is within the format of the lotus. If you remember the lotus, you'll see this word lotus comes out a lot. Lotus this and lotus that with Thoth. He likes the lotus. But these are the lotus crystal skulls, and they are out of the 72. There are 12. There used to be 11, and now there are 12 holding a grid, a very specific inner grid. It's like all the 72 move and work through the lotus, which is held by 12 who are holographically viewed or come together within the sanctuary mountain of I just have too much in my head right now. The one in Tibet that I say, the Kailash.
Kailash, Mount Kailash.
I know that better than my last name, but sometimes I can't remember my last name.
I hear you.
So anyway, in Mount Kailash, and they aren't actually physically in there. There's a holographic field that the 12 project. And the 12 are projecting it for all 72, because remember, some of these 72 are not even on this planet in thresholding chambers. Some of them are in Mars. That's a whole nother story. In the pyramid complex on Mars. So, where was I in this? Yes. So the 13th. The 13th is not actually a crystal skull. Thoth uses that term 13th living crystal skull simply to denote her placement as a living being to bring the whole format of all the skulls together. She forms the central crux within the 12, making it the 13th. Of course, 13th is a Christic number, and it's also the number of the Mazaloth. The Mazaloth is the 13th zodiac. The 12 is the Mazaroth, and the 13th is the Mazaloth. And the Mazaloth represents, again, the Grail consciousness that we speak about so much. And the 13th, we could see that is the divine feminine Christ, the Christic aspect of the divine feminine. So let's look at this video about the 13th living crystal skull, and then we'll talk a little bit more about her.
All right, so we'll be back with you immediately after. Please enjoy this beautiful video from Reverend Maia.
Thoth Hara speaks. I reveal the symbolic and sacred name of in-laquet for the living 13th bearer of the crystal skull. In this instance, we can see the crystal skull as a Grail cup filled with the nectar of holy compassion and transfiguration. The living bearer will be female. She will be born into the human race, but her lineage will contain very specific DNA from all the Grail tribes, and thus the star tribes of the planet. Her purpose? To unite the Grail star tribes and further the entire human race, all who carry some factions of those tribes in their genetic code. In-laquet's symbol is a white dove carrying a golden bow of the acacia tree, symbolizing the transfiguration and ascension of the world soul. In other words, all souls coming together in spiritual presence and transfiguration into the new Earth star. In-laquet will come to the attention of several indigenous people through their shamans simultaneously. But she herself will not be of any one tribe or race. She will be a mixture of many. She will call upon many to join her in the sacred walk beginning in Peru and ending in Alaska. In her New Earth temples, the priests and priestesses morph their forms while they slip into the sacred psalming of her tone. Her inscription of light, her mantras and her speaking. The being. In-laquet carries with her the encoding of the inscription of light for the 144,000 infinity points within this galaxy. These infinity points are the organizing white holes which are specialized to emit intelligent commands directed by the black hole of the Hunab-Ku, or center of the galaxy. The infinity point white holes operate within the condition of what scientists are currently calling dark matter. When the dots are connected, this is a path of coherency which is opened through the heart centers of the 144,000 incarnated souls on our planet. So the Yeshuda is activated to open like a lotus and transport the Earth to the next stage in its cosmic journey, what we are calling the new Earth star. In the in-laquet temples of Numisong, the priestesses and priests transform their bodies to become the Somers so that they can enter her body, or rather the cosmic code of the new Earth star's in-laquet cosmic being, which leads to the next stage of the new Earth star formation. Understand that this being I speak of here is foremost a cosmic pattern of unfolding, which is also carried in the incarnational being of the woman in-laquet.
All right. So that is such a powerful reality being brought forward in terms of this actual living being. We're not speaking metaphorically or symbolically. This is an actual being who, as you say, Maya, during the pyramidus radius matrix activation phase, which is sort of the transitional phase of light principle 40 or ascension, that there will actually be in-laquet, this being, this feminine being who will be here during that transition, facilitating the ascension dynamic. So do you want to share a little bit more about the inner earth aspect of her and
Well,
how you received all this?
yeah, let me say this. First of all, I did not know where in-laquet was going to be incarnated. I was thinking it on the surface of the earth. This was just like 2 days ago that I had this revelation. It all came together. Thoth helped me piece it together. And it started when I was looking at part of a text that I talk about in the video. I mean, it's in there, but I wrote it some years ago about her coming from, beginning a sacred walk with all these people in Peru and ending up in Alaska. That's a long walk, you know? And I'm going, wow, what does this happen when? And he said, well, that's in the pyramidus radius period. And you know, when you're talking about walking in the pyramidus radius period, because even though it's not it's not ascended into the new Earth star, it's definitely some kind of a in between ascension experience, you know. So it wouldn't. Maybe there's a walk that we don't quite understand. Maybe it's a moonwalk, you know, but something that takes you from point A to point B, and you're maybe it's like almost like flying across that. I don't know, but I just sensed that when he was saying, oh, well, that's in the pyramidus radius period, that it meant you weren't just trudging along, climbing up boulders and everything to try to get there, you know. It was some other process. And then he reminded me that in 1973 or 4, something way back there, I had received, like, I don't know, maybe 10, 11, 12 pages worth, and it's still in typed form in a notebook. It's not even electronically processed. About the inner earth tribes, select persons of the inner earth tribes coming out of the Grand Canyon, ceremonially coming out of the Grand Canyon and doing a sacred walk with humans on the surface and walking, I've forgotten where, but walking. I don't think that he ever gave the definition. They would gather and they would do the walk or something like that, not giving the location other than they came out of the Grand Canyon. And he said, these are the people that in-laquet will guide. And she will come out in Peru, but she's an inner earth being. And then I thought, oh my God, she's not incarnating on the surface of the earth. And that made so much sense because I was thinking, how can she embody all the star tribes if she's born on the surface of the earth? Because we don't have that kind of genetic field together on the surface. And maybe we will in the future, yeah. But I was contemplating all this. And he said, no, she's part of the rainbow clan in the inner earth. And see, he's been talking to me about that forever. There's not in Seraphim, but another place, there's the collection of souls that come together for the purpose of creating the rainbow tribe. And it's of the whole star genetics. And so she's one of those. She will incarnate there as their supreme rainbow. And so she comes out in Peru, and this walk, apparently she meets she gathers human persons on the surface, and they meet at the Grand Canyon, and the souls come out of there from the inner earth, and there's another group, and they walk on. You know, I don't know this whole story. I've just gotten pieces. And this first piece came to me in 1973, 4, 5 sometime. And I'm just now, just 2 days ago, making sense of it, at least a little sense, how it connects to the 13th living crystal skull and her walk, and the fact that she doesn't incarnate on the surface of the earth. She incarnates in the inner earth, but she comes to the surface. So to me, this was very exciting. It was very revelatory. because it crosses the span of all these many years of my work, and it comes together this way. And that's the magic of living as long as I have, because this happens to me a lot now, where things that I wrote a zillion years ago are fitting into what I'm receiving now and to the current circumstances of time that I couldn't have imagined back then. So anyway, that's how that comes together. And she, according to Thoth, she's only been incarnated on this planet, that soul, one other time. Is, I see if I can get the name, Shushmalundra. I can say it very well. And I have it on my website about her. I didn't put it into the show because I didn't want to make it too long. But she was in, I believe, Turkey or somewhere. But other than that incarnation, she's not been incarnated yet. However, she's being literally, you could say, overlighting or working through Sarafana Adura, who is the twin flame of Thoth. And Sarafana Adura was, wait for it, the white queen, the Lemurian priestess.
So yeah, just to emphasize and clarify the intimacy, presence of this. It all sounds, it's very, cosmic and vast and mythic, and Ascension, Pyramus Radius Matrix, and the New Earth Star. Well, just a moment ago, we held up the White Queen hosting skull, which is the light-coded energetic presence of the being of whom we now speak. It doesn't matter whether you believe that or not. You don't have to believe that. But just for me as a storyteller, I resonate with intuitively where, given my particular lifetime of seeking and learning and meditating, where there's a resonance that lands in me and says, okay, this is an important truth expressed in this story in this way, and it lands in coherence and integrates with the larger cosmic story, as I understand it, and for me through Kriya Yoga and Christ and Krishna, and that. But it's always important to make it real and personal and here and now. And that's the value of pilgrimage. I mean, for me, as a meditator, I sit down to meditate, and I have a travel altar with the SRF gurus on it. And I remind myself, okay, these are not just pictures. There's a picture of Christ. There's a picture of Mahavatar Babaji, because it was important for me to physically go to India, to make the long journey up to the Himalayas, to then make another long journey on foot to Babaji's cave. So the value of that for me is that I remind myself when I pranam within to Mahavatar Babaji, to place myself in that physical location of his cave, to make it personal. I have been where he was. Swami Shri Teshwar, I have been where he was in his ashram at Serampore. Of Yogananda, I have sat on his tiger skin meditation place, where as a boy, he received visions of saints. I've been to his home at 4 Gorpar Road in Calcutta. I needed to do that to make it real for me. Now, we don't have to, and Babaji said this to Sri Jayamata, the successor to Yogananda. He said, tell everyone you don't need to come to the cave. The cave is here. The cave is here, right? I am here with you. If anyone says with reverence the name of Jesus Christ, they receive that blessing, or Mahavatar Babaji, you receive that blessing. So in that same way, just a moment ago, Maia held up this crystal skull. On one level, it's a commercially made contemporary crystal skull. But if you're familiar enough with Maia's life and work over 50 years, which is why I asked you, Maya, to just wait a second. Don't just go, yeah, here she is. Well, we'll put her back. Wait a second. Let's just be present here. And I know she's very heavy. It's not easy to hold her up. But to just, okay, what dwells here? What reality, light and codes is hosted here, right? And given the video we've just seen, in-laquet is the White Queen. The White Queen is hosted in this skull that we just shared with you. You don't have to believe that or not, but okay, you've got a little qualifier there.
It's not exactly that way. Remember, what's hosting in the skull is the soul and the being of Thos twin flame, Sarafana Adura. But he is opening a path for the 13th crystal skull personage to come through her, to work in that energy frequency through the white. It's a finer point, but it's really an important point because we need to have a name for her, I guess, other than the 13th crystal skull, whatever she is not yet able to do that herself. She's not a crystal skull in the sense that these others have made.
I see. Okay.
So she has to have another medium to go through to get here. And that is the medium. So yes, there is an energy of the 13th in this hosting skull, which is in the dweller, but it's not a direct transfer. It's a coupling transfer,
Okay.
I guess.
Yeah. Well, so we are going to share with everyone some pictures at the end of this program of the actual journey that this White Queen crystal skull we've just seen took when it made its activational journey. Would that be a good phrase, Maia?
Yes. Just a few pictures that Unity took of the process and shared with me. And also I will include a few pictures of the altar itself. Many of you have seen it, but some of you haven't with the skulls, 3 minutes tops probably. I haven't made it yet, but I will, and we'll put it in at the very end of it.
And so it's, just to let everyone know, it's in the same room from which Maia is speaking to us at the other side of the room. Her dining table has essentially become a crystal skull altar, where it's quite a powerful place, and there is a very powerful activational sword with very high codes embedded in it as well. So there is a third video which will conclude our program, and we won't come back afterwards to analyze it or discuss it or explore it, because really it is its own message. And Maia's videos sometimes are purely activational, are not so much about information, although there is important information conveyed in the words. There's not a voiceover in this one, but if you simply allow yourself to be in a receptive frame, let the visuals wash over you, the music wash over you, and the meaning, the activational impact of the words on the screen, there is a powerful activational dynamic that is carried in these videos from Maia's many years of immersing in this stream, and of course your artistry as a mystic visionary artist, as everyone has been able to see from the previous ones we've shared. So please go ahead.
At the very end of this video, starting at the part where you see these little artificial angels and it's going down into the city, those scenes, those pieces, I took from some YouTube videos that were floating around, a lot of different ones. So it wasn't very proprietary. They had them in all different ones. Different people had, done their own thing with them. And they are all in very Christian videos about, the biblical story of how you go into the city of Revelation, and and all of this. And when I was looking at this, I just came across it, and Thoth was on my shoulder, so to speak. I was saying, oh my God, I see what it really is. I mean, it's like there's two stories, There's this story that they understand, that they've interpreted from the Bible. And then there's this story, the Thothic take on that Bible revelation. And so I took those and segued it right into this stream on this video, and you read what Thoth's take is on each of these scenes, and it's really quite incredible, because I already had information on all of this, and they're the visuals, and it's coming out of this fundamentalist Christian understanding of the Bible. So I just thought that was fabulous. So I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, I love that there is this hidden unity within this larger arc of history, within some of the more I guess fundamentalist is as good a word as any, within various religious traditions. I mean, there's a fundamentalist, literalistic interpretation within Islam, the Wahhabi schools. Then you have, radical, nationalistic, what we might call fundamentalist Hindu, and of course, as we know, Christian as well, that take, what we would think of as a narrowing of this larger picture. And there is this inner hidden unity, such as Paramahansa Yogananda brings forward in his wonderful commentary on the Gospels, the second coming of Christ, the resurrection of the Christ within you. And that's what we always try to come back to here, is that we're sharing profound and amazing information and light, I would say, as it's, come through Maia's work. I'm adding my own perspective, from my Templar work, sacred activism, yoga meditation over the years. And, but it all comes down to the heart activation within us, and to resist the temptation to get caught up in doctrinal disputation and, theological conundrums and this ritual versus that. And as brothers and sisters, children of the Divine Mother, of Heavenly Father, of Christ, the universal Christic consciousness, Christ consciousness. That's where we have our focus and emphasis here. And so we hope that this is helpful and uplifting for you. It certainly is for us just to share it with you in this way. It's a very deepening and inspiring thing for me, I know. So Maia, any last message or word you might want to say?
No, we're just going to lead out with this beautiful video, and then right afterwards, about a 3-minute little bit tour with the White Queen, so you get the feeling of that. And then
we'll share some beautiful photographs from the journey of the White Queen with you. And of course, we always like to, the little reminder you see in every YouTube video, please like, share, and subscribe if you're drawn to this and want to share it with your friends. So thanks for joining us, and bless you, everybody. God bless us, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.
Okay.
you.